This week, I want to talk about something that Charlie mentioned on Shabbat. I wasn't going to do this teaching this week, but it really fits in between these two Torah portions. And I decided on Shabbat that I would talk about this week. It's something that I've been thinking about for a long time. Anyone who is around Sukkot may have heard me speaking about it. I know during Sukkot I'd message Charlie to come over to the tent to talk about it as I was having thoughts, just running things by him, see what he thought about it. And the issue is about children. What is the right way to raise one's children? I think this is something that is a big topic for a lot of people. It's certainly something that people wonder about. The idea of strong, not sheltered is fairly self-explanatory. I was quite dismayed when I decided to call it strong, not sheltered yesterday, or the day before, sometime recently, and yesterday being Shabbat for me. I was quite dismayed when I typed in strong not sheltered to see what images came up, to see if there was anything good that somebody had conceived of with those keywords. I was quite dismayed to find out that there's actually hashtag strong not sheltered. But I thought I won't be dissuaded from using it. It's a good thought, although it's not originally my thought. Regrettably, it's a bit of a character flaw of mine to want to have been the person to have thought of something. If somebody shows me something and I'm already aware of that thing, to kind of say, oh yeah, I know about that already. It's at least a desire within me to want to do that, even if I try to moderate it. It's not good, but anyway, it exists out there, and it's kind of, its existence in the world is to do with like helicopter parents who won't let their children ever experience anything of any danger. They always want to shelter their children from anything that they can. And that's quite fitting, because I think that people become kind of like Bible helicopter parents. You get the idea of very strict Christian families. Most people will be aware of, the idea of having a strict Christian family, and no, we don't allow that, and we don't allow this, and you won't be doing this, and you won't be doing that, and being very strict with the children. I think that what we should be aiming for is to make our children strong in the faith, not sheltered from evil. Those things which we might think are dangerous spiritually, we shouldn't be helicopter parents in that way. Now, when I'm saying this, you're going to have to use your own discernment as to what is the correct age. All I can really do is give you guiding principles. I can't say, right, when your kids reach 12, that's it. No more telling them that they can't do this or that, or, whatever. There's no hard and fast rules over it, just guiding principles. Young children, you're going to want to give them a household in which they know what is good and what is evil. But after a certain point, you have to allow your children to be exposed to things that are dangerous. And you'll see why as we go through this. Now, this is a thought which, although it is certainly in the Bible, it is something that people of the world are aware of. Whoever this guy is, let us not pray to be sheltered from dangers, but to be fearless when facing them. And I think that really encapsulates what I'm trying to say. Obviously, this is not a man of the word who is saying this, but there are many things which are true and which are self-apparent, which you will find in the word. When I was first thinking about all of this, not necessarily that I was struggling to articulate appropriately what I was saying, but when something is true, it's always something that I want to find it in the truth. I want to find it in the word. And it wasn't readily apparent to me exactly where it was in the word. It took some thinking about to think, well, what exactly is this concept, and where do we see it in the word? Because obviously that's important. I spoke to Carlo about this towards the end of Sukkot, after I'd had a little bit of time to kind of mull over, well, is this in the truth? Is this a biblical teaching? Or is it the wisdom of the world, no matter how true it appears to be? But as I say, it is in the word. I think that one of the areas that this kind of comes up is the idea of homeschooling children. Should you homeschool your children and keep them away from the ways of the world, keep them away from dangerous ideology, the idea of countless genders and all of this potentially damaging, dangerous ideology? Should you try to keep your kids away from it? And I don't think that there is, that on that issue, on that on the point of whether or not you should homeschool because of dangerous ideology that children might be exposed to, I don't think really there's a should or a shouldn't. We have people at the fellowship who homeschool their children, people who don't homeschool their children. And I think that what we should bear in mind is that whether or not somebody gets led astray from God isn't dependent upon what they are exposed to per se. If they are God's and they are one who will understand the light when they see it, then they will understand the darkness to some degree when they see it too, but maybe they need to experience the darkness. Now, I will probably, almost certainly I would say, homeschool my children, me and Ashley, of course, will homeschool our children. But it's not really because of the dangerous ideology that they might be exposed to, because they're going to be exposed to dangerous ideology in the world. What one wants to do is to make one's children strong. Not shelter your children from the dangerous ideology, but make them strong in the faith. Give them the tools that they need to be able to dismantle ideas that are false. Shouldn't be scared of false ideas. It's like the idea of free speech. You don't stop people from saying things that you disagree with. It's much better for people to say things that are wrong and for there to be a way to counter the things which are wrong, for their ideas to be exposed by the light, so to speak. Yeshua speaks about something that's very, very important to remember when we consider this. He says, "You do not believe because you are not of my sheep, as I said to you. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give them everlasting life, and they shall by no means ever perish. No one shall snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of my Father's hand." So, if we're worried that someone's going to come along and snatch our children away out of the Father's hand and they were truly His, then that is against what Scripture says. They are people who know Yeshua's voice, know the word, in other words. You do not believe me because you're not of my sheep. If someone gets led astray into unbelief, it's because they have not recognized and understood the light. They love the darkness rather than the light because their deeds were evil. That can be really painful if you think about it as your children. But one is not able to stop one's children from being led away by those things. It doesn't matter how much you kind of tell them the Bible, put it in front of their faces and say, look, it's the light, recognize the light. You can't make your children believe. They either will or they won't believe. And if we think of our relationship to our children as being like the Father's relationship with us, He doesn't shelter us from evil. He tells us what is right, and those who believe will choose what is right, those who believe Him. And we see this going right back to the earliest parts of the Bible. In Genesis 2:16-17, it says, "And Yehovah Elohim commanded the man, saying, Eat of every tree of the garden, but do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall certainly die." So we can tell our children, we can tell them, this is what is good. Do this. These are the words of God. But we can't make them believe that they're the words of God. And God Himself didn't try to do that. He just said, this is the way that it is. If you do the bad thing, you're going to die. And when He created everything, He didn't have to create a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If He'd wanted to shelter His children from evil, He could have just not made that tree. But He gave them a choice. He put that tree there so that they would be tempted by it. And He knew that they would fall ultimately. And mankind is brought back to God throughout the play out of the rest of history. But He knows that temptation is necessary. Temptation and tests of faith are critical, as we've seen recently. In Genesis 3, verse 6, it says, "And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise. And she took of its fruit, and she ate." Okay, so this is really important for us to recognize. The woman chose to sin, to go against what she knew that God had said because of other considerations. She saw, oh, well, wait there, this is pleasant to the eyes, it's desirable, it's something that I want. And we should recognize that that is a part of each one of us. That's really important to tell your children, that they are going to be tempted because within our flesh, sin dwells. And our flesh doesn't want to submit to what God says to do. That's really important for them to know. If you just paint a picture of perfection and make it out to your children that, you're perfect and the situation will be perfect if, people are just following the word of God, and you put a happy face on it, then that doesn't really equip your children to deal with these things, because inside of them is going to be temptation. And they're just going to be thinking, am I just irreconcilably evil? Because, I can't just automatically get on board with this. And if you do that, if you create that situation, all that you will do is cause your children to never be able to tell you who they really are. What you're going to create is little actor children, little hypocrite children who know how to put the mask on. They know what the right answer is. Children are intelligent. They can tell you the right answer. They know how they should react. And you'll never know that that's who your children are. That actually they are tempted by evil, because you've sought to shelter them from evil as opposed to make them strong against evil. One must trust Yahovah with one's children. One must trust the armor of Elohim, so that if you clothe your children in the armor of Elohim, they are able to repel Hasatan. You have to have faith in that, and not faith in your ability to stop evil ever coming near them. Because, as I say, you're just going to create children who know what to tell you, know how to be when you are around, but have never been tested. Just untested, untempered children. This is no good for anybody involved in the situation. It's no good for the children, because they have just learned how to play a role, and basically you've just created little actors, which, as we've seen recently, Yeshua describes it as hypocrites. If you forbid things and you say, no, that's evil, you can't watch that, for example. I forbid you to watch that. You haven't dealt with the issue. Maybe that person needs to be able to watch whatever it is and decide for themselves, no, that's not good. And as I say, I can't tell you what age this is appropriate. There is going to be a kind of a letting go process. Obviously, you would tell young children, don't do this because it's dangerous. But after a certain point, you have to let people experience the danger and maybe learn for themselves, maybe fall over, maybe break an arm, maybe whatever, be seriously injured or hurt by something, in order for them to learn the lesson for themselves. And that is obviously a really difficult thing for a parent to experience, for a parent to watch. And, Yahovah allows us to experience evil and experience temptation. But Yeshua told us to pray, lead us not into temptation. He will allow those trials, but it's not like he just says, okay, I'm just going to bring all the evil of the world upon you all at once, and you can just deal with this. But for us with our own children, we don't want to just forbid them from doing anything and prevent them from any evil, because that's not going to make them strong. You don't want children who are like this. You want children who are like this. You want children who, when the devil comes with his temptations, are able to say, it is written this or it is written that. And of course it's good to raise one's children in the Torah and to tell them what is good and to be that example of what is good for them. But if you paint that picture of perfection, then they're just going to think that they're flawed, and they're just going to hide who they really are from you. And that's no good. We should be vulnerable to our children about our own sin, about our own temptation. You don't have to go into detail where that might not be appropriate with your children. But it is good for them to see us admitting that, oh, I was wrong there and I've made repentance for it. If you're just portraying a face of perfection, then they're going to think that there's something wrong with them. And as I say, they'll just hide who they actually are from you, and you'll never actually see who they really are. You might get glimpses of it in things that they do, but they're never going to feel comfortable sharing that with you because they think of you as some kind of perfect example, like you are Yeshua or something. So I think it's important as well to be vulnerable and to admit your own temptation to your children. In 1 Corinthians 5, 9-10, it says, I wrote to you in my letter not to keep company with those who fornicate. And I certainly did not mean with those of this world who fornicate. Since then, you would need to go out of the world. So Paul acknowledges that going out of the world is a nonsense. I think a lot of people think we're set apart from the world, as in we're separated from the world and we shall never be in the world. But that's not biblical. We're set apart in our behavior from the world, in the things that we do, in the morality that we have, because we believe the Father, and the Father certainly is set apart from the world. So that's how we're set apart from the world, but we don't seek to go out of the world. We seek to exist in the midst of the world, set apart from the world, being a light to the world. But we should never seek to remove ourselves from the world. We should never seek to remove our children from the world. Because, as I say, temptation and being exposed to evil is necessary. I know that Ashley had a lot of friends growing up who came from very strict Christian households, and I know that it just caused issues in the end for them. Because if you kind of paint this picture of perfection and of being separate from the world and kind of isolated, then when they go into the world, they are going to have the temptations of the flesh, which you've almost kind of erased from the picture. You haven't ever acknowledged what the actual problem is with them. And they will fall because they will be completely naive to it. It's important that we understand the world to be able to want to be separate from it. It's important that your children aren't just unprepared for situations in the world. Like, if they cannot conceive of somebody being evil, and I know that I have difficulty sometimes. I say to Charlie sometimes, I just can't believe that somebody would do something like that. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that some people have some really underhand underhanded motives in things, so that we don't end up getting taken advantage of, being completely naive to the way that the world works. I mean, if you think of your own life, you became aware of how the world works, and that worldly wisdom enables you to operate better in the world. If you were just unaware of certain things, then you would be completely blindsided. You come into a situation and you'd be completely naive, and you would go about the situation as if, everyone just follows the word and everything's always going to be great and, whatever. You come into it naive to the ways of the world, and you end up in a bad situation because of your naivety. In 1 Peter 1, 7-9, it says, "In order that the proving of your belief, much more precious than gold that perishes and proven by fire, might be found to result in praise and respect and esteem at the revelation of Yeshua Messiah, whom having not seen you love, in whom you exult with unspeakable and esteemed joy, yet not seeing, but believing, obtaining the goal of your belief, salvation or deliverance of souls." You see, there's real value in the test. You cannot protect your children from tests, and neither should you want to, because those tests in and of themselves are valuable, and your children will grow by them. And if you try to protect them from certain things for too long, then they will, Yehovah is not overcome by your efforts at keeping them from evil. Yehovah can bring tests in their life despite your trying to shelter. In the book of Genesis, we get a very good example of this, and this is, of course, why I'm doing this video at the moment. Genesis 27, verse 6 says, "And Rivkah spoke to Yaakov, her son, saying, See, I heard your father speak to Esav, your brother, saying, Bring me wild game, and make me a tasty dish to eat, and bless you in the presence of Yehovah before my death. And now, my son, listen to my voice according to what I command you. Please go to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, and I make a tasty dish from them for your father, such as he loves. And you shall take it to your father, and he shall eat it, so that he might bless you before his death." And Yaakov said to Rivkah his mother, "See, Esav my brother is a hairy man, and I am a smooth-skinned man." Now, I want you to understand some context to what's happening here. I was looking for the age of Jacob when he left for Padan Aram to go to Lavan. And all I could find was an argument by someone making the case that he couldn't have been any more than 63. But he was really quite old at this point, and he'd grown up living in the house of his parents. And we see Rivkah here. She tells Jacob to do something which he acknowledges is wrong. He knows that it's wrong. But, he's grown up in this house. His mum tells him what to do. And, of course, we know that he ends up doing it. I'm not making excuses for Jacob's behavior there. I'm just pointing out that he's a very old man living in the house of his parents, and his mum tells him to do something, and he decides, this is what I'm going to do. He points out, he's a hairy man, I'm a smooth-skinned man. And I imagine when I'm thinking of Jacob and Esau We know Jacob was a tam man, a complete man, a whole man, or whatever you want to translate it as, dwelling in tents. And Asaph was a man of the field. I think of Yeshua's parable when he says the field is the world. Not that I think that he's defining what is happening here, but I think of Esau more as a man of the world, a bit more rough and ready, and I think of Jacob as more kind of quiet, maybe more studious sort of person. That's just how I imagine it to be. Verse 12 says, "What if my father touches me? Then I shall be like a deceiver in his eyes, and shall bring a curse on myself and not a blessing." So his qualm here isn't, this is morally wrong. It's what if Dad realizes and then he thinks I'm a liar, then I'm going to bring a curse on myself and not a blessing. See, Dad's not going to be happy. But his mother said to him, "Let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice and go get them for me." So here Rivka tries to do what I think a lot of parents do. She tries to do the impossible, and she tries to take the consequences of her children's or Jacob's actions upon herself. Your consequences be upon me, your curse be upon me. I'll take the blame for it. I'll be the one who is responsible. And of course, we can't do that with our children. We have to let them go and make mistakes. We have to let them be exposed to things by which they will be tempted, maybe even fall because of those things, maybe even get hurt because of those things. But we can't prevent those things from happening. All we can do is tell them what the right thing to do is. What Rivka does here is she tells him the wrong thing to do, which is obviously a converse example of what I'm talking about. One thing that I would recommend to you, I mentioned before that this is something that the world is aware of, and it's something that is quite a major field in psychology. I would encourage you to go and watch, type in on YouTube, Oedipal Mother. Jordan Peterson has some excellent videos on this. If you type in Oedipal Mother, Jordan Peterson, you'll see some very insightful videos. Oedipal from Oedipus, the Greek myth. It's spelled Oedipal. Oedipal Mother. I'd encourage you to look at that, because you'll see the potential trouble that may come from going more towards sheltered than safe. Verse 13 is what makes me think of this. His mother said, "Let your curse be on me." You'll see if you look at the Oedipal Mother stuff, how this is a great example of this kind of trade-off of protection. Well, you'll see I'm not going to go into psychology in a video that is about the scriptures, but there's a real pathology to the idea of sheltering rather than making strong. There's a real potential pitfall, a real pathology to that way of thinking, which is, as I say, a whole recognized field of psychology. In Genesis 27:18-24, it says, "And he went to his father and said, 'My father,' and he said, 'Here I am. Who are you, my son?' Yaakov said to his father, I'm Esav. Yitzhak said, how is it that you found it so quickly, my son? He asked him a second question, a second opportunity to tell him the truth. Jacob tells a second lie, because Yehovah your Elohim brought it to me. Yitzhak said, please come near so that I feel you. So he doesn't believe what he's being told. Yaakov went near to Yitzhak. Yitzhak doesn't recognize him. His hands are like his brother's hands because he has intentionally, to deceive his father, made them appear so. And he said, are you truly my son Esav? So another opportunity for him to tell the truth here. And he says, I am. So Jacob here he's been untested in what we have recorded in the Torah up until this point. And at this point, there's something that he wants. He wants the blessing of his father. And he is willing to do what he knows is wrong and to tell lie after lie after lie and to deceive by putting the hairy garments on. He's willing to do that because it's something that he wants. So it comes to a moment in which he's tested. Will you do the right thing? And he chooses to do the wrong thing. And this is a moment that everyone will come to. You know, we can't prevent Yehovah from testing our children. And as I say, neither should we want to. Genesis 27:41-45 says, and Esav hated Yaakov because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esav said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father draw near. Then I am going to kill my brother Yaakov. So here everything starts to fall apart. As much as Rivka has tried to engineer a situation which is correct in her eyes, Yehovah brings this test, if you want to say it in that way, and everything from that point starts to fall apart. Esav now wants to kill his brother, whereas before everything was, presumably not as bad as this. The family life was quite happy. Now Esau wants to kill Jacob because of what Rivka has done. She tries to hold it all together, as we'll see. But this is another example of when it's important to admit your mistakes to your children. Rivka has the chance to admit her mistake to Esau at this point and say, I told him to do this, I'm sorry, it's my fault. I repent of what I've done. She has the opportunity to do that, but she doesn't. Maybe it would be too far to say she deceives, but she tries to engineer the situation to work out to be okay, even after this. The words of Esav, her older son, were reported to Rivka, which is interesting because Esav said that in his heart. It must have been that he said it more broadly than that. And she sent and called Yaakov her son and said to him, see, your brother Esav comforts himself concerning you to kill you. And now, my son, listen to my voice and rise, flee to my brother Lavan in Haran. So she said, let your curse be upon me. But this isn't something that she can take it upon herself. These are consequences that Jacob is going to have to face himself in his life. But instead of admitting that she's wrong, she says, we'll just do this and everything will turn out to be okay. Stay with him a few days until your brother's wrath turns away, until your brother's displeasure turns away from you, and he forgets what you have done to him. And I shall send and bring you from there. Why should I be bereaved of you both in one day? And this is kind of one of the underlying pathologies, the idea of not wanting your children to go from you, to want them to remain forever. She says the thing that she highlights as the issue is, why should I lose both of you in one day? She says, just go for a couple of days until your brother gets over it, and then I'll send for you and you can come back. Which, of course, is not what happens. What actually ends up happening is Jacob goes out and he doesn't come back before the death of his mother. So his mother never gets to see her son again. In Genesis 28, 5-9, it says, so Yitzchak sent Yaakov away, and he went to Padan Aram to Lavan, son of Bethuel, the Aramean, the brother of Rivkah, the mother of Yaakov and Esav. Esav saw that Yitzchak had blessed him and had sent him to Padan Aram to take a wife from there. And he sees that he says to him, do not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. And that Yaakov had obeyed his father and his mother, and he'd gone to Padan Aram. So Esav saw that the daughters of Canaan did not please his father Yitzchak. And Esav went to Yishmael and took Machaleth, the daughter of Yishmael. So Esav actually ends up marrying one of Ishmael's daughters because he's trying to piece together exactly what he should be taking from this situation. He sees, wait, my father blessed him, sent him away, and he doesn't like the daughters of Canaan. Maybe I should go and do this. So Esau is perhaps a little confused. Esau certainly doesn't benefit from what Rivkah has brought about in this situation. She was trying to make it the way that she thought it should be. She was telling Yaakov what he should do. When Yaakov does it, it all blows up in her face. She doesn't admit wrong. She thinks that she's going to be able to send him off to her brother and then send for him in a couple of days. Doesn't end up happening. She never gets to see her son again. Esau's damaged by this. Jacob ends up in a terrible situation. You have to wonder if Jacob had these tests in his life a bit earlier, would he have had to undergo such trials as he did? Obviously, that's just speculation. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. Let's just say he did. And that's the way history happened. I often think when people talk about time travel, or when people say, maybe someone asks, what would you have done if you didn't teach the Bible? I just think that's a pointless question. It's an impossible question. I wouldn't have done anything if I didn't teach the Bible, because that's what happened. That's the way that the creation came to be. That was the play out of history that ends up at the end with the kingdom. That was the only way things could happen. There is no what if this didn't happen. So maybe my question is a moot point. But we can certainly say that when we try to engineer things in our own strength and engineer situations to be the way that we think they should be, often that has unintended consequences. And funnily enough, Ishmael was the product of the same thing. Yehovah had a plan. He told Abraham that he was going to have an heir, and that his heir would come from his body. And Abraham took the female servant of Sarah. And Ishmael was the product of that, when actually he didn't need to be involved to bring about an heir at all. In Genesis 28:12-15, now Jacob has left home, and now things really start to happen for Jacob. The becoming of the man that he is going to be, the believer that he is, him becoming Israel, if you like, all of that only starts to happen when he leaves his parents' house. He dreamed and saw a ladder set up on the earth, and its top reached to the heavens, and saw angels of Elohim going up and coming down on it. And see, Yehovah stood above it and said, I am Yehovah, Elohim of your father, and the Elohim of Abraham, your father, and the Elohim of Yitzchak. The land on which you are lying, I give it to you and your seed. And your seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and you shall break forth to the west and to the east and the north and the south. And all the clans of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your seed. And see, I am with you, and shall guard you wherever you go, and shall bring you back to this land. For I am not going to leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. So it's only once Jacob leaves that he actually starts to become the man of faith. The Yehovah appears to him. He makes the same covenant that he's made with Abraham and Isaac. And he says, look, I'm going to be with you wherever you go. And this is what we need to trust and have faith in, that Yehovah is with our children. If they are his, then he will be with them. And if they're not his, we can't sneak them into the Father's hand. And nobody is going to snatch them out of his hand if they are his. We see Jacob undergoing many trials. Very tough situation for Jacob. But none of it was ever going to snatch him out of the Father's hand. In Genesis 28:20-22, it says, Yaakov made a vow, saying, seeing Elohim is with me, or since Elohim is with me, and kept me in this way that I am going, and has given me bread to eat and a garment to put on, when I have returned to my father's house in peace, and Yehovah has been my Elohim, then this stone which I have set as a standing column shall be Elohim's house, and of all that you give me, I shall certainly give a tithe to you. So Jacob actually beginning his walk with Elohim and saying, seeing you're with me, him actually experiencing life on his own with Yehovah as his guide. We see him making a vow to Yehovah, and that is something that we can only really prevent our children from reaching the stage of doing in their lives. We can think, well, I'm just girding them with the truth so that they can overcome these things. But actually, once they know the truth, as I say, I can't tell you what age this is going to be at for you. For each person, it's going to be different. But there's going to be a point when you're going to need to release them into the world, and all you can hope to do is prevent them from beginning to walk with Elohim and to have Yehovah as their Elohim and being their guide in life. In Genesis 29:4-8, it says, so Yaakov said to them, my brothers, where are you from? And they said, we are from Haran. And when I think of what's happening here, I think of Yaakov coming from his parents' house all naive into the world, and he comes to near Haran, and he sees these shepherds there, and he says, my brothers, where are you from? And they say, well, we're from Haran. And he said, do you know Lavan, son of Nahor? And they said, we know him. And we know of what sort Lavan is. He certainly seems to be a little bit of a trickster, a little bit underhanded. And Lavan kind of recognizes that of himself, as we'll see. But he just comes up to these people and he says, do you know Lavan? And they say, yeah, we know him. It just smacks of naivety to me to go up and to proffer this information to these men who are shepherds, probably kind of worldly wise men who, have a certain way of operating, a certain way of viewing the world, that Jacob will be completely naive to. That's the sort of thing that I'm saying. It's a perspective that we need to be able to appreciate so that we can look at it and say, well, this part of it's right, this part of it's wrong, and we can make our own assessments of it. But anyway, he comes to them, he said, is he well? And they said, well. In the Hebrew, he just says shalom as a question, and they respond, shalom. So basically, well, and they say, well. And see, his daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep. And he said, see, it is still high day, not the time for the livestock to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go and feed them. I just think, again, this just smacks to me of naivety. He comes across this group of shepherds and he starts telling them what they should be doing with the sheep. Oh, it's not time to do that. Gather the sheep and water the sheep. And the shepherds respond to him. They said, we're not allowed until all the flocks are gathered together and they've rolled the stone away from the well's mouth. Then we shall water the sheep. So they're not hostile to him. They just tell him the way that things work, and he doesn't really understand the way that things work. He just thinks to come in and tell them what to do, which is, as I say, it's naive, but it's something that if you are familiar with people, you're not just going to do that because you've got a bit of experience of how people are and how people will react to the things that you say. And that's really, really valuable. If you shelter your children and you keep them away from that, you're just preventing the growth that they should have as people. Genesis 29:13-14 says, it came to be when Lavan heard the report about Yaakov, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Then he told Lavan all these matters. And Charlie alluded to this yesterday, Shabbat. Again, it smacks of naivety. Lavan comes to him. Yaakov doesn't know who Lavan is. He doesn't know if he can trust Lavan. Maybe he imagines that he can because he's his mother's brother. But he just tells him all this stuff that's happened. And Lavan says, you are indeed my bone and my flesh. And this reads to me anyway as Lavan saying, you're kind of like me. He told him all the stuff that had happened. Told him that he deceived his father. And Lavan said, you're a bit me, you are. But it's just naive, isn't it, to come to Lavan and to just tell him all of this stuff. One needs to be circumspect in certain matters and know when to say things and when not to say things. And all of these things are things that one can only experience by being around other people. And they will be the people of the world. like Paul says, if you were to remove yourself from all the fornicators of the world, then you'd have to go out of the world. Now, obviously, I'm not suggesting that would be the case. He kind of puts it forward as a preposterous proposition. But, Yaakov really gets himself in trouble here. He just goes into the situation. He just thinks, perhaps, being honest is the best thing to do in all situations. And it's certainly true that being honest is the best thing to do. But that doesn't mean you have to volunteer all the details about a subject when they've not been asked of you. And Yaakov seems to lack this sort of sense. Genesis 29:15-17 says, Then Lavan said to Yaakov, Because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for naught? Let me know what your wages should be. And I kind of think of this as Lavan taking advantage of Jacob a little bit. You let me know what your wages should be. He kind of suggests to him, because you're my relative, should you work for nothing? Which kind of suggests that because he's his relative, there should be some kind of, they should work for him for less, perhaps. He says, you tell me what your wages should be. And Lavan had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were weak, and Rachel was lovely of form and appearance. And Yaakov loved Rachel. So he said, Let me serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. And Lavan said, It's better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Stay with me. And Yaakov served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love that he had for her. Then Yaakov said to Lavan, Give me my wife, for my days are completed, and let me go into her. So he just presumes, well, the right thing will happen here. I've done the work. Now, what was agreed upon shall be given to me, which maybe that's naivety as well, to do the work up front and expect that somebody who really comes across to me as someone who is of the world. They use Yehovah's name, but they're not perhaps sincere. They're not like Abraham. And it's important that our children be able to distinguish between people who use Yehovah's name and people who are sincere in following Yehovah. But Yaakov just says, I've done the work. Now give me the wages that we agreed upon. And of course, Lavan doesn't do that. I can't say that Jacob wasn't expecting that might happen, but that is something which is certainly a possible scenario. If you shelter your children, that they would not expect somebody might just not pay them for the work that they've done, or try to be underhand in giving them their wages. Lavan gathered all the men of the place and made a feast. And it came to be in the evening that he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to Yaakov, and he went into her. And Lavan gave his female servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a female servant. And in the morning it came to be that, see, it was Leah. So he said to Lavan, What is this that you've done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me? And Lavan said, It is not done this way in our place, to give the younger before the firstborn. So Lavan knows what he's agreed to, but he thinks, he presents that there's a reason why he's done what he has done. He could have said in the beginning, oh no, you can't have Rachel. You would work for Leah, because it's not done that way in our place. But it seems to kind of harken back to the idea that Yaakov is the younger, took his brother's blessing, and Lavan says, oh no, we don't do things like that around here. It's not right to give the younger before the older. So he deals with Yaakov in an underhand way here. Yaakov just saying, why have you done this? Why have you deceived me? Did we not agree on Rachel? I've worked 7 years. Complete the week of this one, then we shall give you this one too. For the service which you serve me, still another 7 years. So what Lavan does here is really wrong. He cons him basically into working another 7 years. And Yaakov doesn't really stand up for himself. I'm not saying that standing up for himself would have been the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. Just noting that Yaakov just says, oh, another 7 years. Okay, I'll work for you another 7 years for what we agreed on initially. Then in Genesis 29:41-43, it says, it came to be, whenever the strong ones of the flock conceived, that Yaakov placed the rods before the eyes of the flock in the gutters, so they would conceive among the rods. But when the flocks were weak, he did not put them in. So the weak ones were Lavan's, and the strong ones Yaakov's. And the man increased very much, and had many flocks, and female and male servants, and camels and donkeys. So whether or not one could say that it was Yehovah who brought this about supernaturally, Yaakov's intention here was to take the flocks from Lavan. He contrives a method of taking the flocks from Lavan. So Yaakov's intent was not good in doing this. He thinks, if I do this, then the flocks will become mine. And he became increased in flocks. Genesis 31:3 says, and he heard the words of Lavan's son saying, Yaakov has taken away all that was our father's, and from what belonged to our father, he has made all this wealth. And they weren't wrong. That is what he did. And he hears them talking about him. Here's these again, what I perceive to be men of the world talking about him. And maybe he feels justified in what he did. But he does what's wrong in order to benefit himself. Again, like he did when he stole the blessing. And Yaakov would look at the face of Lavan and see that it was not toward him as it was before. And Yehovah said to Yaakov, return to the land of your fathers, to your relatives, and I am with you. So Yehovah here gives him some reassurance. Perhaps knowing, well, he certainly knew, but perhaps in anticipation of the fact that he's going to encounter Esau on the way back. But Jacob is beginning to perceive things, or at least he does perceive here that Lavan's attitude towards him was not as it was before. And again, he has done something to try and steal from Lavan at this point. And he sees, oh, wait there, this isn't turning out well. But these are the sort of experiences that our children need to have. They need to be exposed to situations in which they can go after their own hearts and choose to do that which is wrong to benefit themselves. Maybe so in the future they can realize that that's wrong. We can't shelter them and prevent them from encountering these sorts of things. Yaakov was maybe 60 years old when he left his father's house. So he's pretty old when he comes across all of these situations. But these situations are the things that shape him as a man. And Yehovah again says to Yaakov, I'm with you. He doesn't say everything that you've done was okay. He just says, okay, time to leave. Go home. I'm going to be with you. Genesis 31, 6-9. Yaakov speaking to his wives, he says, and you know that I've served your father with all my strength. Probably true. Yet your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. But Elohim did not allow him to do evil to me. Well, maybe not. Maybe that's just how Jacob sees it. When he said this, the speckled are your wages, then all the flocks bore speckled. Well, yeah, because of what you did. When he said this, the streaked are your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked. And as I say, it could be that this was Elohim that was doing this. But it tells us in the text that Yaakov's intention was to bring this about. So Elohim has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. So this is how Jacob perhaps perceives the situation. It's certainly how he's telling his wives that the situation actually is. So he's going to his wives and he's telling them things that aren't really true, kind of half truths, kind of glossing over things with God and saying, oh, all of this was ordained by God. And he says, you know that I've served your father with all my strength. As I say, that may well be true, probably true, let's say, that he served him with all his strength. But he also sought to take away all of his flocks from him. So he's saying the truth, and then he's saying something that isn't quite straight with them. And he's having this little conflab with his wives about their father, which is probably not a good thing to do. It's underhanded. In Genesis 31, 14-16, it says, Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, do we still have any portion or inheritance in our father's house? Are we not reckoned by him but as strangers? For he has sold us and also entirely consumed our silver. For all the wealth which Elohim has taken from our father are ours and our children's. Now then, do whatever Elohim has told you. So they're not exactly straight either. They're saying, well, the only point in staying here would be if we had the inheritance here, whereas actually now all our father's wealth is our wealth. Why would we stay here? And then they again put this veneer of God on it. Do whatever God has told you. Whereas maybe it was wickedness in their hearts, which, they were saying, well, there's no point in staying here. We can't benefit ourselves. So Yaakov comes, he tells them something that's not quite true, hiding the wickedness in his heart. And then they come back and they're not quite straight with him. And it's just generally not really a good situation. But it's certainly something that made Yaakov the man that he is. So maybe we would seek, maybe if we saw our children become involved with somebody who was maybe not seeing things exactly straight, maybe we would feel justified keeping our child from that person. And maybe we would feel it's our parental duty to stop child X from being with suitor Y, And maybe we would be right in identifying the wrong things that that person was doing. But we can't prevent our children from any harm. We can't say, well, this is bad, therefore you will not be with this person because they did something that was bad. It's not our place to be doing that. Yaakov has the seat in his heart also, and so if Rivka had been there and she'd observed in Leah and Rachel that they kind of had this wickedness in their heart that they wanted to only stay with their father because of the inheritance that they could have, and Rivka had said, Jacob, you cannot be with these women, they are wicked, then Jacob would have never had the children that he ended up having, etc., etc. We can't seek to manipulate and shape reality to be the way that we think it should be, or just go off of things that we observed maybe in another person that we acknowledge is wrong, and therefore try to make our children do what we say that they should do. All of these things, maybe Jacob would see, actually, my wives are prone to do this. They're only really interested in their self-interest. And maybe that then spawns a conversation with them by which they both grow in the future. We don't know. We're not God. We can't shape situations to protect our children from absolutely everything that we think that they might encounter, whether or not we've been correct in perceiving a particular danger that they might encounter. Genesis 31:26-31 says, and Lavan said to Yaakov, what have you done that you've deceived me, and driven my daughters off like captives taken with the sword? Which is fair enough. Why did you flee secretly and deceive me and not inform me? And I would have sent you away with joys and songs, with tambourine and lyre. Now, Lavan is probably engaging in self-deception here at the very least. But he's got a point that Jacob just left with his daughters. Think of how you would react if someone just left with your children without telling you. Now, maybe the idea that he would have sent them off with joy is just fantasy. Maybe there would have been trouble, and that was what Jacob was trying to avoid. But Lavan certainly has, a part of what he is saying has a point here. You did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now you have been foolish to do this. It is in the power of my hand to do evil to you. But the Elohim of your father spoke to me last night, saying, guard yourself that you do not speak to Yaakov either good or evil. And now you have gone because you greatly long for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? In Hebrew, my Elohim, God's little g, of course, which again is a good point. You've left, but why did you steal from me when you left? And obviously it wasn't Jacob, it was Rachel, but Rachel's kind of got a bit of a twisted idea of her father, and maybe of her entitlement, and she decides to steal from her father, and none of that is good. Then finally we get a bit of honesty from Jacob. Jacob answered and said to Lavan, because I was afraid, for I said, lest you tear your daughters away from me, which it's probably an honest reason. in all of these situations, everybody just kind of cheers for their own team. And everyone's kind of telling half-truths and putting false veneers over the things that they say. Like, why did you do this? As if Lavan can't imagine in his head why Jacob would do such a thing because of the way that he's been treating him or the way that he feels about Jacob. And it's useful in these situations to honestly assess where one's own faults lie, of course. But through all of this trouble that Jacob's having, he's learning and he's becoming a man of Elohim. Now, he's still representing himself as having acted righteously, but at least we see him give Lavan a little bit of honesty here. And if Lavan was honest with himself, he'd be able to say, yeah, fair enough, I can see why you would be afraid of that. Probably not Lavan's reaction, but he was able to see that in that situation, even if he didn't acknowledge it. Genesis 31:48-50 says, and Lavan said, this heap is a witness between you and me today. That is why its name was called Galeed. Also Mitzpah, because he said, let Yehovah watch between you and me when we are out of each other's sight. If you afflict my daughters, or if you take other wives besides my daughters, although no man is with us, see, Elohim is witness between you and me. So Lavan, funnily enough, has a bit of a situation here where he has to let go of his daughters. He has to say, let Elohim watch between me and you when you're out of my sight. If you treat my daughters badly, Elohim is witness between you and me, and that is, funnily enough, how we should be with our children. We should release them to the world to see whatever they're going to see, to be tempted, however they're going to be tempted, and we should pray for them that they will remain strong in the faith that we have instructed them in. In Genesis 32:3-6, it says, and Yaakov sent messengers before him to Esav his brother in the land of Seir in the field of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, say this to my master Esav, your servant Yaakov said this, I have sojourned with Lavan and stayed there until now. And I have bulls and donkeys, flocks and male and female servants. And I have sent to inform my master to find favor in your eyes. So the messengers returned to Yaakov, saying, we came to your brother Esav, and he also is coming to meet you, and 400 men with him. So here we see Yaakov. Now he's left Lavan's house and all the trouble that was there. Now he is faced with the consequences of his own actions all those years ago, 14, 20 years ago, however many years ago it was. Jacob here is quite an old man, maybe 80 years old, when he's returning. Genesis 32:11-12, we see Yaakov again in this situation of difficulty. He reaches out to Yehovah, which of course is what we would hope for our children. Not that we would protect them from any evil, but that when they're facing evil, they would rely upon Yehovah. And he says, deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esav, for I fear him. lest he come and shall smite me and the mother with the children. For you said, I shall certainly do good to you, and shall make your seed as the sand of the sea, which are too numerous to count. So here he is depending on Yehovah, depending upon his promises. His mum and dad aren't around to do anything for him. His Father in heaven is the only one that he can rely on. And as I say, that's an attitude that we should seek to foster in our children. And they can't do that while they are under our roof or our guidance or whatever. We might want to do that for them. We might want to say, well, this situation, this is how you deal with this situation, and this is how you deal with this situation. But really, what we want to foster in them is a reliance upon God, because that's all that they're going to have one day. In Genesis 32, we see that Yaakov, he's prayed to Yehovah, he's asked him to help him, but he's not fully dependent on him, just as none of us are fully dependent upon him. All of us have fears in our hearts and want to change things to be more in line with how we want. It says he spent the night there, and he comes up with a present to give to his brother because he wants to appease his brother. And he says to his servants, you've got to say this when you encounter Esau. Commanded the first one, he says, when my brother Esau meets you and he asks you this, then you have to give him this answer. He tells them again what they should say. And again, speak to Esav the same word, he says to the second and the third ones. So he's telling them what they should say to Esau, because he thinks he's going to be the one who engineers his deliverance from this situation. You shall say to him this, let me appease him with this present. That's what it's all about. He is not saying Yehovah will deliver me in this situation. He's saying, what can I do? What can be said to him that will make things go the right way? The present passed over before him, but he himself spent the night in the camp. And you can imagine what that must have been like for Jacob, thinking, tomorrow I'm going to meet my brother, whose blessing I stole, with his army of 400 men. I don't imagine that was a comfortable evening for Yaakov. It says in Genesis 33, Yaakov lifted his eyes and looked and saw Esau coming, and with him 400 men. And he divided the children among Leah and Rachel, and the two female servants. And he put the female servants and their children in front, and Leah and her children behind, and Rachel and Yosef, of course Benjamin is not yet born, put them last. And he himself passed over before them, and bowed himself to the ground 7 times, until he came near to his brother. So obviously, he is nervous about this situation. He's ordered things so that if it goes as badly as it could go, maybe Rachel and Yosef will be the safest as his favored wife and his favored child. In Genesis 32:28, we see something very interesting, something that people often don't realize about this verse, or don't focus on with this verse. He says, your name is no longer called Jacob, but Israel, because you have striven with Elohim is the thing that most people will concentrate on here. Yisrael, Sarah being to struggle or wrestle with, El, of course, being Elohim. So it literally means he who has striven with Elohim. But look what it says after that. It says, and with men. And for the purposes of what we are looking at here, that's the most important part. He also has striven with men and has overcome. He has grown as a person in his wranglings with Laban and Laban's sons who are talking about him behind his back. He's grown. He's striven with men. And the angel points this out as a reason why he is given this name. Striving with Elohim, of course, is the most important thing that our children can learn to do, but also dealing with the men who are around them appropriately, or the women who are around them, men being a reference to mankind, of course. This is important, and it's interesting to me that this is highlighted by the angel to Jacob. In Genesis 34 verse 7 it says, the sons of Yaakov came in from the field when they heard it. And this is ultimately what we are doing when we are raising our children. We're raising them to be people in and of themselves, to stand on their own 2 feet, to have that relationship with God, and ultimately to be parents themselves, to deal with situations like Jacob deals with here, where his sons come in and his daughter's been raped. She's not raped. His daughter has gone off with a man that perhaps he wouldn't have chosen. This man had seduced her. The idea that she's been raped is a popularized idea. But I believe that I will probably deal with that in the Torah portion this coming Shabbat. But Yaakov is put into a situation that he has to deal with his own children, and he has to guide them according to what is right and what is wrong. In Isaiah 43, 1-2 it says, but now thus said Yehovah your creator, O Yaakov, and he who formed you, O Yisrael. And of course, Yaakov is long dead by this point, so Jacob and Israel is a reference to us, his people. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name, you are mine. When you pass through the waters, I am with you, and through rivers they do not overflow you. When you walk through fire, you are not scorched, and the flame does not burn you. And our attitude should be similar as parents. Of course, Elohim is outside of the creation. He knows the end from the beginning, and he can guide people in a way that we will never be able to as parents. But we should equip our children to have this attitude of mind. I am going to encounter dangers, but Elohim is with me, and he will help me through them. And we should have confidence in Elohim. He hasn't just promised this to us. If our children are Jacob and are Israel, then he has promised this to them as well. We can't be with them like Elohim is with them through every situation. So all we can do is make them strong. We can't shelter them from anything that might hurt them. Elohim doesn't do it with us, and we shouldn't seek to do it with them. So for kids who are watching this, you should be aware that you're going to encounter situations in life in which you are tempted, in which you're tried, which aren't going to be comfortable, and that you can have faith in those tests of faith. You should recognize them as what they are. If you go back to the video from last week about belief, you will encounter those things. And what you're going to have to do is not try to retreat to a place of comfort. What you're going to have to do is gird up your loins and deal with those situations. Man up. You're going to have to take on those situations head on. This is the image that I like of what it is to gird up your loins. You're going to encounter things that aren't going to be easy to deal with. But you shouldn't retreat from those things. You shouldn't seek shelter from those things. What you should do is seek to have faith in Yehovah and know that He is with you. Solomon's advice to young people is, rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart gladden you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes, but know that for all these Elohim brings you into justice. So don't be an actor. Don't just act out the right thing, say the right thing at the right time to get by. Walk in the ways of your heart. Go after the things that you want to do, the sight of your eyes. But know that for all of that, Elohim is going to bring you into justice. You're going to be judged by Elohim's word. And for parents, I'm not saying don't be involved in your children's life. In the case of what I was talking about with the suitor, maybe you want to give your children advice about what's good and what's bad. In the case of what they should watch, instead of it being, I forbid you to watch that. Instead, maybe educate why it's a bad thing that you don't think that they should be doing, and let them make it the decision for themselves. You can't shelter them from those things. If their desire, what's in their heart, is to go after those things, maybe they need to do that to realize that they're no good. But you should trust that if they are Yehovah's, if they're in the Father's hand, nothing is going to snatch them away from His hand. And that you can't protect them from those things by forbidding them from doing them. Allow them to understand. Show them what the Word says about it. And if they believe the Word, then ultimately they will choose that. And if they don't believe the Word, you're not going to sneak them into the Father's hand by preventing them from doing something that He would find distasteful. It's been quite a long one. I'm sure that you can tell why I don't do Torah portions now, why I do these shorter videos. But I will see you next time, Yah willing.